you got your racket and you never really feel like your racket fits your hand. Even though you've gone and sized up your grip correctly, how can you make it so that your racket feels like it fits in your hand? Let's take a look. So I'm going to give a few tips today around how I modify my grips. Firstly, so that in general, irrespective of the actual grip I'm using to play a shot, I feel like it actually fits into my hand a lot better. And that's not talking about sort of the different grip sizes, it's talking about more probably the shape of the grip and the bevels. And secondly, I make a modification so it's much easier for me to find my specific grips. So I play with an Eastern forehand, an Eastern backhand for my single-handed backhand, and then obviously continental for volleys, serve, smash. So what do? I've got a stock racket here which I'm going to modify, and essentially what I do is three things. Firstly, I buy these in a grip size 4, but I need a grip size 5. So I build this up with a couple of overgrips. I also find that these are the head rackets, and these pallets, so the grips are called pallets, they're too round. And I have real difficulty finding definition. So what I do is I make these more rectangular, and I'll show you how I do that. And then the third thing I do is for particularly the single-handed backhand, it benefits to actually hold the racket higher. Not sort of right up here, but just slightly higher. And so I make a modification to the butt flare to be able to both feel my grip with the rectangular shape, but also I can sort of feel when I'm a little bit higher and got a firmer grip, which doesn't actually impact when I'm playing a forehand, which I actually want to be lower down to get a bit more whip. So how do I do this? So simply, I take my stock racket and I'm going to leave that grip on there. The first thing I do is build it up to make it more rectangular. And I do that with little bits of cardboard. And effectively what I'm doing is making a little sort of pyramid shape, if you like, with a slightly thicker bit and a thinner bit. And then what I'm going to do is tape those onto the diagonal corners of the bevel. And literally what I'm doing is building this up to be a bit more rectangular. And all I'm going to do with each of these is lay them one on top of each other, get some sellotape, and then I'm going to lay them on top. Like so. So what I've got is the thinner bit of cardboard laying in the center of the thicker bit of cardboard, and then I'm just going to trim the bottom off of that to make it so there's not too much sellotape on there. And then all we're going to do is just above where the flare of the butt is, I'm going to start putting this, taping it on to the corner bevel, just like that. And what this does is it literally just makes the bevel, the grip more rectangular as opposed to having those edges. And why I only do it sort of this long is I only want to feel it in my fingers, so I don't need it all the way up the grip. And what that does, it just really gives me some definition. I can feel the edges, which allows me to get my grips a lot better. So let's put that onto all the corners. Okay, so what I've done then is I've made this grip, it's a lot more rectangular now. And that just really allows me to feel the exact place that I want my grip to be. And anyone who's thinking that looks, I'm ruining a racket and nobody does this. So there's an interview with Mats Wilander, probably about maybe 10 years ago, where he was talking about how he modified his racket and he taped cardboard under the grip as well, and he said he wanted to make it same sort of thing. He wanted to make it more rectangular. So that's on there. Next thing I do is I build the grip up because I want it to be more like a grip size 5. So what I do now is put an over grip on. Okay. And then what I do is finish this off with some black electrical tape. And this is purely sort of more cosmetic, in part because I'm going to put a Torna grip on top, and that won't go up quite so high. So I actually start this relatively low and just wrap it round. And what this does, it just, when the Torna grip goes on that's a bit shorter, I don't see the horrible yellow of this overgrip. So let's just put that on there. Okay, so that's now built up that grip to basically a grip size 5. Right, what's the next thing I do? So with that done, the next thing I do is, so that's made my grip where it sort of feels I can really kind of easily get into, whether it's Eastern forehand, Eastern backhand, chopper grip. I can really feel the grips. I really like this. But the next thing I do is when you hit a single-handed backhand, you tend to hold a little bit higher up. Just gives you a lot more control, whereas on the forehand you'll hold maybe a little bit lower down, so you can get that sort of real wrist action going on. And so I find both for the backhand but also volleys, I'll hold the racket a bit higher up. As you can see, just as I'm hitting the ball here on my forehand, you can see getting that whip, the racket lag, I hold the racket lower down, whereas as we'll see here on the backhand, I hold it higher up for a firmer grip, so you'll see I'm holding a little bit higher up the grip. And to make it so that I can easily find that, I can't do that with the normal butt of the racket. It's just not defined enough. So what I do, I was doing this the other day, and I suddenly thought to Richard Gasquet, which, just looking at the picture here, of course he's got the massive end on his racket. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to flare out the end of the racket a bit more, and it really, really works. I can just find particularly that Eastern backhand so much better. And so to do that, what I do is I take the grip, and then I take some over grip, and I basically take 2 pieces, one thick and then one thin. And what I'm going to do is lay them over each other, and then put them on the end of the racket, which kind of creates this accentuated taper. And all I'm doing with this is I just take some electrical tape, so some black electrical tape, and put it along the pieces I've cut. So let's just snip that off. Lay it along the bottom. So I just basically sort of create this taped around, and then all I'm going to do is around the bottom of the grip is just put that on and pull it nice and tight. And probably what I have to do here, I might have to adjust it, it's just a little bit long, because I want the edges to butt up to each other. I don't want there to be an overlap, so I'm just going to trim that off. Then I can just pull them up really tight, butt the edges together. And then what I do is, because I've got an overlapping piece, I just get some more electrical tape and just tape that down, and it also just secures it in place. And then what I do is I do the same thing with the narrower piece. I just put that on, and again I'll just lay that tape on there, get it nice and lined up. And what I do then is lay that towards the bottom. And so what I'm doing is creating a taper so that it flares the racket out. And again, I'll just pull that really nice and tight. I'm just going to have to adjust that. Again, snip a bit off because I don't want them to overlap. I want them to butt up against each other. There we go. And then again, I pull that really nice and tight and get that so they butt up. Let's just make it so that tape is on the edge. There we go. So pull that round, butt them up just like that. So then what that's done is it's made the end kind of flared out, so that now when you hold the racket you can really kind of feel your hand, particularly on the Eastern backhand, because it's the up and down, it's a lot thicker. You can really feel your hand sort of grip onto that, whereas on the forehand, on the Eastern forehand, I think because it's going across, you don't really feel it, so you can actually still have the racket further down for both when you're doing your serve with a chopper grip, where you may sort of hold further down to get the pronation, or holding a bit further down on your forehand to get the wrist lag, but then you can come up and really feel that end and hold a bit further up for whether it's your volleys, smash, or the Eastern backhand. And then the final thing I'm doing, of course, is I use Torna grips. The reason is because but grocerily, I tend to sweat, and I just find that the Torna grip in particular really absorbs that. Whereas if you use I used to use a Yonex Super Grap or the Signum Pros, those became so slippery in my hand. So I really do like using the Torna grips, although I kind of respect that some people, they just fall apart in your hand, I guess, if you don't sweat quite so much. So then I just put the Torna grip on top. So what I've done is, of course, I've put those cardboard on to make the grip squarer or more rectangular, so I can really feel the edges. Then I put the overgrip on to build up to a grip size 5, and then I'm flaring out the butt of the cap, which just allows me to get that feel for where I want to hold the racket a little bit higher up, particularly on my backhand and my volleys. So, it's just a really interesting thought, because if you think about it, the only bit of your body that touches the racket is your hand on the grip, and therefore, it kind of makes sense to personalize that, or think about how can you make it so that it really feels like that fits in my hand so nicely, and I can just find my grips so well, whether I want to be a bit lower and Eastern on my forehand, or a little bit higher and Eastern backhand, or on my volleys, just again holding a little bit further up, just like Nadal does. So, again, maybe you won't do exactly this, but it just gets you thinking, are you making your racket your own, and is it working for you or not, depending on how you've customized it? Hope that's interesting.